In an attempt to learn lessons from my past, to apply them to my present and future, I have been looking back on the past year. February 2025, 1 year ago from today, I woke up after one of the most important weeks. The previous week involved my first ever in-person market trying to sell my pottery and a surgery. I had only taken my first pottery class 8 months prior to this week. I recognize that 8 months from my first class to my first market sounds insane. And that's because I often do insane things. Mostly of my own accord, but the pressure from my boyfriend at the time, who was very worried about my finances, did not help. One of my biggest lessons I've recognized while reminiscing on the past year is that sometimes it's the people who claim they care for you the most that become your biggest opposition. This lesson was solidified when setup day rolled around. The day before the market, you're allowed to visit the venue and set up your display booth. I was stressed out, and the stress only multiplied when my boyfriend decided to try and pick up the wooden shoe rack that weighed 70 pounds that I was going to use as a display for my cups like a maniac, twisting his back into a natural curve while attempting to load it into the car for transport. He threw his back out and then started screaming in pain. I was obviously worried and didn't know what to do. I asked him if he wanted to go to the ER, go to the hospital, and he said no. So it was continue on or just sit and watch him scream. I also had a window of time scheduled to set up my booth, and as a woman who has just existed, I know that men have much lower pain tolerances than women, so it probably wasn't as bad as it seemed. So I essentially took him to his parents' house and left him there while I set up for the market alone. Let's remember that at this time, I was still going through chemically induced menopause. That was to reduce the size of my fibroid that was lodged in my uterus. So I was sweating profusely before I had even arrived at the venue. By the time I actually finished hauling all the things through the parking lot and chasing wheels that had fallen off my poorly assembled dolly, I was absolutely drenched in sweat and exhausted. I stupidly dressed cute, hoping to make some friends, with some of my booth mates, and trying to show people, hey, I'm cool, That prim, cute image was swiftly shattered. I laid down on the concrete floor, arms splayed out wide, in my, thankfully, black dress, heaving in air as if I had just ran a marathon. And I say thankfully black dress because if my dress were any other color, I'm sure people would have called in the medical team due to the sheer amount of water that was seeping out of my pores. They would have had no other option but to assume I was having a heat stroke and dying if they could visually actually see what was happening to me. And if you're wondering what happened to the 70-pound shoe rack, the one that threw my boyfriend's back out, yeah, I had to load that solo and unload it and then carry it all the way through the venue. And it wasn't a cute little 10 feet from the parking lot to the booth. It was more like 10 times that. After I got my booth set up, I remember praying to God and asking for a sign that I was supposed to be a potter and that I was actually going to be successful at it. I knew I was an amateur. My goal was to only sell a single cup. I was like, Lord, please just let me sell one single cup and that'll be enough for me to know that I should keep pursuing this. If not, I'd quit. And you know what? By the end of Sunday, I was trying to rearrange the display not to show the empty spots from the places people had purchased my pottery. I definitely got my sign. And it doesn't make sense. One of the booths next to me shared that they weren't going to make profit enough to even cover the booth fee it took to be at the event. Yet, here I was, 8 months into pottery at my first market ever, and then I had made enough to cover my booth fee and then a little more. And I'm not talking a lot more, it wasn't crazy, but it was still more than the booth fee. That's more than a win for me. And all I have to say is God is good, and literally nothing is impossible with God. It was one of the most magical experiences. I don't know if I could ever put into words the atmosphere of the artists in the venue or how it felt to see someone else's eyes light up and the joy they had for something that I had made and to appreciate appreciate it enough to think, yes, like I need this in my life. It made all the hours spent practicing, planning, and preparing worth it. The day after the market was the day I had been waiting for months. The day of my surgery had finally arrived. My fibroid grew to the size of grapefruit, to where it was so big that it was smashing everything on my insides. It was painful to sleep, it was painful to sit, it was painful to stand, it was painful to just exist. And like, I don't think you understand how much pain it is, because I have a high pain tolerance. And the only reason it was found is because I was in so much pain one night that I literally thought I was gonna die. And it was embarrassing, because it was like at my boyfriend's parents' house in their bathroom. Like I was in there for an hour. Like I was like, this is where I'm gonna die at. It was insane. But that's the only reason I went to the doctors and proceeded to advocate for myself, because I had gone to the doctors before for a similar pain and it was brushed off, and I was told, drink some more water, stretch, the typical thing that you hear. And only after I thought I was gonna die did I say, no, I'm not, like, this isn't just a little drink water fix. Like, I need tests done, I need something. And you know what they found? There's giant fibroid. The dudes that did the scan were literally like, dang, you're full of poop. It was embarrassing because everything was so smashed that it couldn't eat. Like, my intestines were smashed up so much that lesson learned here is advocate for yourself, because if you don't do it, no one else will. And I heard this for years, people constantly telling me to fight harder for myself, specifically when it came to the doctors, and I would brush it off every single time. I thought, since they went to school for all these years, they have a fancy degree, they have to know better than me. Wrong. They do not know your body better than you do. So do not suffer for years when it could have been caught earlier. Advocate for yourself. And you know what? If they do the test and find nothing, you still win. Because then at least you have the peace of mind knowing that you're healthy and that you have your own back. Long story short, if you didn't learn anything else from this recap, please at least take the lesson to advocate for yourself. Advocate for yourself, and God is good. Okay, see you next time.